Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. This has I've been off for a couple of weeks and I'm sorry about that, but it's been a really busy time over the holidays and now for the first couple of weeks of the new year, not the least of which is because of all the craziness that's going on in the United States. I've got some guests lined up that we're going to talk to here shortly about everything that's happened in Washington, D.C., the Capitol riots and the response to all that. But to be honest with you, I'm pretty happy that I wasn't in Washington, D.C. for all that, just because it's so sickening. It's so sad to see that happening in our country. I'm in Armenia right now. If you've been watching the podcast recently, over the last several months, you know that I was here during the war in October, November, and I did a lot of reporting on what was going on in the Nagorno-Karabach region, the part that Armenians call Artsakh. And that war has now stopped, but not ended. So I came back here because it's just impossible to tell the story in just a few minutes. The 4 minutes that I get when I'm making a news piece is just not sufficient to get into the complexities of all the things that have caused this conflict and what we can do as Americans to pray for these people and to help these people that are hurting in this area. There are a lot of them. So I came back to Stepanakert, where I am right now, brought my family this time, and the plan is to film a documentary. We're going to put together about a 1-hour documentary about this conflict and about just Armenia and the history and the culture and the people and what led up to all of this, because there's a lot of history to this. But suffice it to say, if you wanted to put the whole thing on the back of a napkin, this is a Christian nation, a nation full of believing Christians who are facing an existential threat from multiple sides. And this is something that's been going on for a long time. It flares up and gets hot, and then the war cools off again. And I've been walking around here because over the last several months, during the most recent flare-up of this conflict, hundreds and hundreds of young men from this area, and it's amazing how young they seem when you get to be my age, have been drafted into the military here to fight for the Nagorno-Karabakh, to fight for Artsakh, and fight for Armenia. And many of them didn't come home. As a matter of fact, right off to my left here, there's a memorial for the young men who died in this conflict, and it's far too many. Everybody in this city, this is the capital of Artsakh, everybody knows someone who was killed in this most recent conflict, and that's a big deal. The nation is still in mourning. They've just been through their holiday season, which is much, they celebrate Christmas on January 6th instead of on December 25th. And there's a really historical reason for that. As a matter of fact, January 6th was the original date that we celebrated Christmas, but not now. It was changed back like 336 AD, but the people of Armenia were celebrating Christmas long before 336 AD, and so they didn't feel a need to change. So they still celebrate on the 6th of January. Well, this year it was kind of a muted celebration. Not much happened. They didn't decorate, they didn't celebrate, and that's for several reasons. Obviously, the COVID virus pandemic put a damper on things, but more importantly, this nation is in mourning. The nation is hurting very badly because they feel like they really lost in this conflict. So let me just give you a quick primer as to the Nagorno-Karabakh region, what happened, and why they are where they are today. First of all, the Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, same thing, is a region inside Azerbaijan that belongs to Armenia. And the reason is that it's full of Armenians. Armenians have always lived here. They have history here going back thousands of years. But during the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin moved around a lot of people groups And that resulted in this sort of pocket of Armenians living in an area surrounded by Azeris in Azerbaijan. And when Armenia broke away from the Soviet Union at the fall of the Soviet Empire in 1991 and 1992, the Artsakh region wanted to stay with Armenia. And so they became what's called not an enclave, but an exclave of Armenia. So it's apart from Armenia, but it's still Armenia. And this people, they consider this to be a separate country called Artsakh. It's the Republic of Artsakh. As a matter of fact, this is the main government building behind me, the Capitol building inside the capital of Stepanakert. There's about 150,000 Armenians that live here, and they identify fully as Armenian, but also as people from Artsakh, and they have their own sort of dialect of the Armenian language. So they're very, very patriotic, fierce people. And this fight has been going on with Azerbaijan for a long time. They had a big war in the 1990s. In that war, Armenia was much stronger, and so their army pushed out the Azeris and actually pushed them back not only out of Artsakh, but out of a whole buffer area around Artsakh, and took a bunch of Azeri land and held it. And so for the last 30 years, the Armenian army has been holding that sort of buffer zone on a stable front line. They had a ceasefire, but not an end to the conflict. During that 30-year period, the government of Azerbaijan has been slowly building up their military. And they've been building them up to the point with all of the oil wealth that Azerbaijan had, spending a lot of money on their military. And they got to the point where they outnumbered and outgunned the Armenians by about 10 to 1. Not only that, they've been forming alliances with Turkey, and Turkey has designs on this whole region. They want to reestablish the Ottoman Empire, the Caliphate, the Muslim Caliphate in this area. So this Christian nation in the middle of what they want to see as a Muslim empire is a problem for them. So Turkey has been supporting Azerbaijan in trying to put pressure on Armenia. And indeed, when the war started, excuse me, when the war started, Turkey helped Azerbaijan with drones and artillery and even fighters and people that were consulting with the Azeri army to help the Azeris win this battle. And without that help, the Azeris might not have won, even though they way outnumbered the Armenians. As a matter of fact, Turkish drones played a huge part in this conflict and were responsible for a lot of the dead soldiers over there on that wall. This was a type of warfare that the Armenians never had to face before, and it's really unfortunate how many of them fell prey or fell victim to the Turkish drones that filled the sky. The same Turkish drones, by the way, that were shooting at me a year and a half ago in Syria. So again, Turkey has been extending its influence around this whole region, from Libya on one side to Syria, down to the south of Turkey, and now to the east of Turkey into Armenia. It's a big deal. So what we are seeing is the result now of this push that the Azeris made during this conflict. They took back all of that buffer zone and about a third of Artsakh. And by taking back a third of Artsakh, they actually took a very important city just 5 miles from where I'm sitting, called Shushi. And right now, as I speak, there are Azeri troops and Turkish troops that are in that town of Shushi, overlooking this town that we're in, with their guns trained here on this town. That's not a good thing. So the Armenian forces went to their allies, the Russians, and said, "You got to help us out here. Please help us get a ceasefire." They made an agreement to stop the fighting right where it was, and that meant that the Azeris got to keep all the territory that they gained back during the conflict. That's a big blow for the Armenians and for the people of Artsakh, because they took a lot of historic sites, monasteries, churches that have been around since the 1300s, things like that, and of course, all of those places, not to mention cemeteries and things, are being defaced by the Azeris, by the Muslims now, torn down really, really bad. And that just cuts to the heart of the people of Artsakh. As a matter of fact, when we drove by Shushi yesterday, there's a giant Azeri flag hanging up that is pointed this way just to sort of rub their nose in it. Awful childish, if you ask me. Suffice it to say, it's a sad time right now in the history of this country. And so the Russians came in, they brought about 500 or 800 peacekeepers to stop the fighting and make sure the fighting stopped. And they committed to keep those peacekeepers here for 5 years. But nobody has any idea what will happen when the 5 years is over, because those Azeris certainly, they've made it very clear, they have designs on retaking this whole area, pushing out all of the Armenians, even into Armenia. And the Turks and the Azeris say they plan to wipe out Armenia altogether. That is an existential threat for this Christian country. And that's why, as Americans, we should be praying for these people and helping them however we can. I'm here to do that. Some people have been partnering with us, viewers of the podcast and supporters of the podcast have been sending money, and we're going around now and handing that money out. So I'm going to have more podcasts coming up here shortly that will show you what we've been doing with a lot of those donations. And it's some pretty cool stuff. So stay tuned. I'm Chuck Holton. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. And we'll have more for you from Artsakh coming up in our next episode. So stay tuned. 11:45. I was watching.